Thank you for joining us today for our webinar on Pathways to Prosperity, the intersection of health and prosperity. My name is Michael Roush, and I am the Manager of Financial Empowerment and Innovation at the National Disability Institute. Before we get started with today's webinar, we do have a few webinar housekeeping tips to go over, and I would like to introduce my colleague, Nakia Matthews, who will go over this information with us. Nakia?
Thank you, Michael. The audio for today's webinar is being broadcast through your computer. Please make sure that your speakers are turned on or your headphones are plugged in. You can control the audio broadcast via the audio broadcast panel, and if you accidentally close this panel or if the sound stops, you can close and reopen this panel by going to the top menu, Communicate, Join Audio Broadcast. If you do not have sound capabilities on your computer or you prefer to listen by phone, you can dial the number you see here along with the meeting code, and you do not need to enter an attendee ID. Real-time captioning is provided during this webinar. The captions can be found in the Media Viewer panel, which appears in the lower right corner of the webinar platform. If you would like to make the Media Viewer panel larger, you can do so by minimizing some of the other panels like chat, Q&A, participants. Conversely, if you do not need the captions, you can minimize the Media Viewer panel. There will be a question and answer portion at the end of the webinar today. Please use the chat or Q&A box to send any questions that you may have during the course of the webinar to either Michael Roush or to me, Nakia Matthews, and we will direct those questions accordingly at the end of the webinar. If you are listening by phone and not logged into the webinar, you may still ask questions by emailing them directly to Michael at mroush@ndi-inc.org. Please note that this webinar is being recorded and that the materials will be placed on the NDI website at realeconomicimpact.org. If you experience any technical difficulties during the webinar, please use the chat box to send me, Nakia Matthews, a message, or you may email me directly at nmatthews, with 2 T's, at ndi-inc.org.
Great, thank you, Nakia. I would like to make a quick note that today's webinar will be going till 4:15. We did add an extra 15 minutes just to make sure we get through all of the information, as well as we have plenty of time to answer questions from the audience. I would like to thank our sponsors, Walmart, Bank of America, Acorda Therapeutics, Burton Blatt Institute, and the Internal Revenue Service for their support of the work that we are doing at the National Disability Institute. Today's webinar is sponsored by Bank of America. Before we get started, for those of you who are new to the National Disability Institute, I would like to share with you information on our organization. The National Disability Institute is a national nonprofit organization dedicated to building a better economic future for Americans with disabilities. We are the first national organization committed exclusively to championing economic empowerment, asset development, and financial stability for all persons across the spectrum of disability. National Disability Institute affects change through public education, training, technical assistance, and policy development to help 1 in 3 Americans with disabilities that are living in poverty take steps towards a brighter financial future. To learn more about the National Disability Institute, you can go to www.realeconomicimpact.org. To join the conversation on building a better economic future for persons with disabilities, please join us through the National Disability Institute's Real Economic Impact Network. This network is an alliance of organizations and individuals dedicated to advancing the economic empowerment of people with disabilities. It consists of more than 900 partners in more than 100 cities across the country. The network includes nonprofit organizations, community tax coalitions, asset development organizations, financial education initiatives, corporations, and private sector businesses, federal, state, local governments and agencies, as well as individuals and their families with disabilities. All partners join forces to embrace, promote, and pursue access and inclusion of people with disabilities in the economic mainstream. Today's webinar is about creating a better understanding of the intersection of health and asset building, and how do we build a healthier and financially fit communities across the country. I had the privilege of meeting Elaine Arkin, who is one of our presenters today, at a conference in North Carolina last October, where she was one of the keynote presenters. During her presentation on the intersection of health and asset building, as well as some of the findings from the report that we will be talking about, I found myself sitting at the edge of my seat, taking frantic notes as she was presenting. It had been a long time since I had been impacted both professionally as well as personally on a presentation at a conference. And what it did, it really created an opportunity for me to look at what it takes to build a better, a stronger, a healthier, and financially fit community that I live in. I'm confident that you too will be inspired by the recommendations outlined in the report, some of the statistics, as well as the eye-opening facts that they will share with us. The recommendations from the report provide an opportunity for some thought-provoking conversations that we need to have. We are excited that we're able to bring this information to you all today. In addition to looking at the intersection of health and asset building, we are going to look at key findings from Robert Wood Johnson Foundation's Commission to Build a Healthier America report. And we're going to look at the recommendations on how we can build a healthy and more financially fit community. A key theme in the report that was a takeaway for me is the key piece of working together. And it really provides a look at how life is better when we are all connected, working towards a common goal. And today, we're fortunate to have a longtime friend of the National Disability Institute with us today. Win Lam, who is a philanthropy manager from Bank of America, is going to share with us some remarks and then also introduce our presenters for our webinar today. With that, Win, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Michael, ladies and gentlemen, thank you. Thank you, Michael, for having me again here. And Bank of America is proud to be part of the National Disability Institute's webinars. And ladies and gentlemen, I have the best job in the world. I get to work for an organization that would like to help people and families achieve prosperity, or in many cases, regain prosperity. And the challenges that we've had over the last 5-6 years have given me job security, and many of you are also in that same situation where we're helping people with prosperity regain that. It's interesting. I love what Michael's introduction, where he mentioned a whole bunch of different themes for all of us, and not to give out a commercial for any other organization, but the intersection of healthy and happy, the intersection of healthy and prosperity. It's all the same intersection we're all trying to get to. And at Bank of America, as you may have seen some of our commercials, life is better when we're connected. And today we are connecting with not only the topic of prosperity, but of financial wellness. And at Bank of America, we believe in helping people achieve financial wellness. And financial wellness has multiple meanings for everybody. And that's one thing where it's not just the physical, the psychological, but also the social wellness or the social health of everyone. And we're lucky today to have, as Michael mentioned, executives from the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation to help us explore all of that and what does it mean to be healthy. For those of you who do not know about the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, this was named after General Johnson, and the foundation started in 1972. This is a foundation that's dedicated to one purpose, and that's good health for all. and what they call building a national culture of health. That's especially important. As Michael mentioned, the commission to build a healthier America, that began in 2008, and that is also to help explore, well, if the foundation is helping people with good health for all, why aren't we all in good health? And that's what this commission and their reports are going to help us to discover. And we have two executives from the foundation and also from the commission that will help us with that, Elaine Arkin and Reverend Dr. Eileen Lidner. So these are two that are going to take us through the report and its findings and its recommendations for that, and we are glad that they have joined us. But before I kick it off to Elaine, as you know, the big news this week is the new iWatch. The watch that was just introduced by Apple yesterday, and it's supposed to keep us all healthy. It's going to monitor our heart rate. It's going to monitor our pulse. It's going to monitor our physical activities so that we can get healthy. However, $349 for this watch, and you have to have an iPhone and the iPhone service in order to operate this watch. So that could be close to a couple $100,000 before we get healthy. I'm hoping that this is not part of the recommendations that the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation will be giving us. Eileen, I kick it over to you. Thank you Elaine, excuse me. I kick it over to you. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much, Wynn, and I can assure you that we're not asking people to buy the iWatch, but very timely. Thanks to Wynn, and thanks for Michael in particular for finding us and including us today. We're so pleased to have this time to talk with all of you today, and I am particularly honored to have Reverend Dr. Eileen Lidner, who is a commissioner from the Commission to Build a Healthier America and pastor at the Presbyterian Church at Tenafly in New Jersey, and a widely, nationally admired longtime advocate for children and social justice in this country. So she's a very special person and special commissioner. So this is, as Michael said, Pathways to Prosperity, and we're looking at the intersection of health and asset building. And just to get started, it clicked back, hold on. Let me get started by just telling you briefly about why we believe at the Foundation that collaboration across sectors is so important to improve health and well-being. We know that you all, too, recognize the benefits of collaboration, and it's one of the values that Michael described at the Institute. So we are so in sync on that, Michael. Once I talk a little bit about why there is this connection and why it's important, I'll turn it over to Eileen to tell you the best part about what the commissioners discussed and recommended. So just to get started, if you haven't heard of the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, and Wynn, thanks for explaining it a bit. It's the largest domestic foundation that's totally devoted to improving health and health care for all Americans. And why is that a challenge? Well, let's just look for a minute quickly at the status of health in our country. This slide shows international rankings. It's entitled Worse Health, Shorter Lives. And in 1980, looking at ranks on life expectancy, the United States was 15th in the world among affluent countries, with a life expectancy of just about 74 years. That's 1980. By 2009, and this is even before the recession win that you were talking about, we had dropped to 27th position in the world. So, gee, we're not doing nearly as well as other countries. America is unhealthy. And despite the fact that we lead the world on medical care spending, Americans have worse health and shorter lives than people in other countries. In fact, health in America is worse than in other places on more than 100 measures. One that is really distressing is that 30 countries have lower infant mortality rates than we do. Now, this probably isn't news to most of you listening in today, but the point is that to improve health and to reduce healthcare spending, we need to create a seismic shift in how we approach health in our country. And as the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, we're reaching out beyond our traditional health comfort zone to others, other collaborators who can help improve health and reduce healthcare costs, creating that national culture of health, a culture in our country that values health and says this is something that we need to achieve. Now, why are we so unhealthy? This is a pie chart talking about contributions to premature health or factors that also can prevent premature health. And what's important, a couple of things are important in this pie chart. One is that healthcare is such a small slice of the pie. 10% of preventable premature deaths can be prevented or attributed to healthcare influences, not very much. It's probably no surprise that about 30% of premature deaths are connected to genetic predisposition, and gee, that's really tough to deal with. But what's important is there are two other pieces of the pie here: social circumstances and behavioral patterns, and together they account for 55% of premature deaths, or looking at those same factors, we can use them to prevent premature deaths. Now, let's look at behavioral patterns for a minute. We all know that we all have a personal responsibility to make healthy decisions, healthy choices. But for too many people, the barriers to making those healthy choices are just too high to overcome, even when a person's motivation is great. That's the link to social circumstances on this chart. Let's look for a minute at what that means, social circumstances. This slide is challenges and opportunities that are so linked to health. Things like grocery stores where you can access healthy food, safe and affordable housing, public transportation to get you to a good job and to health care, safe places to be physically active, good jobs, which of course are connected to good schools, all connected to health. So let's just dig down for a minute and what are some of those fundamental building blocks that are hiding beneath all of these factors? Education and health is one, and financial health is the other. So let's just take a quick look at those. Now, I'm going to show you very rapidly these charts, which I know are kind of little to look at. And I just want to tell you the takeaways. The slides themselves are available for download from our website, rwjf.org/commission, and that address will be at the end of this slideshow as well. So what shapes health? More education, longer life. That means that people who have more educational attainment, like a college degree, have a longer life than people with less education, and particularly less than a high school education. The next one, which is not clicking, it's going backwards. Let's see if I can make it go forward. There it goes. The next one is more education, healthier adults. The same thing. The greater the educational attainment, the healthier you're likely to be as an adult. And then let's look at income. So there are two charts on this one page: higher parental income, healthier children. So on the left, which is so tiny you probably can't read it, says compared with children in the highest income families, children in poor families are more than 4 times as likely to be in less than very good health. And on the right, children in those same poor families are twice as likely to be overweight or obese as children in high-income families. So the links are, these are just examples, very strong between financial stability and health and education and health. So what does this mean? You know, we're all trying to achieve that American dream, to live to have a well-lived life, long, happy, successful, healthy. And to achieve that American dream, we look at the connections that are just so close between health, education, good jobs, financial security, being able to afford to live in a safe community where it's possible to make healthy choices. So as Michael was saying, we are also excited to bring to light the links that just can't be broken between these social factors. So let's look at how that plays out. This slide is called Economic Hardship and Childhood Obesity. There are two maps side by side of Los Angeles County. They're heat maps, which means that by neighborhood, the biggest problems are the brightest colors or the most heat. And if you look at the left map, without even having to read it, I can just tell you that it identifies economic hardship. And the brighter the color, the more severe the economic hardship in that neighborhood. The map on the right shows the prevalence of childhood obesity in the same neighborhoods. Now, you don't even have to read these neighborhoods. All you have to do at these maps, just look at them. And what's striking is that the maps are almost totally identical. That is, people working in on asset building and to try to help the financial stability of people in low-income neighborhoods are working side by side with folks trying to improve health in those same neighborhoods. We're really working so often in the same places, so often with the same people, but we just haven't always been working together. We like to say that when it comes to health, your zip code may be more important than your genetic code. And let's look at another example of how this works. So this is a map, a road map of New Orleans, and it's called Life Expectancy, Where You Live Matters. And it shows that people who are born in Lakeview up there with the little green number 80 shows a life expectancy of 80 years, can expect to live 25 years longer than their counterparts in Iberville, even though it's just a few miles away. Now, you know, it's probably less than 10 miles, but if you are born in Iberville, you have a life expectancy of 55 years. If you're born in Lakeview, you have a life expectancy of 80 years. It's just a dramatic example of how important where you live is, and obviously where you live depends on the education you have and the job opportunities you have and your financial stability. So realizing that these social factors, we call them, and we call them in public health the social determinants of health, finance, education, and where you live, learn, work, and play are so important for improving health that we brought together the Commission to Build a Healthier America. As Wynn said, in 2008, there was a first report issued in 2010, and we brought them back together and said, you know, we just are in the middle of this terrible recession, and health is getting worse, and please come back and look at how the world has changed and tell us how working beyond health care we can improve the health of all Americans. So you can see here a photograph of our commissioners. In the middle, Alice Rivlin and Mark McClellan, who are both distinguished economists. And in the front row on the left in the flower dress is Dr. Eileen Blidner. our commissioners here with us today. And Eileen, I'm going to turn it over to you to tell us about the commission conversation and what they recommended. But we need to pass the mic.
I'm delighted to be with all of you today. Thank you, Elaine, and thank you all for your interest and attention to this critical matter of importance for our nation and particularly our most vulnerable citizens. I'm going to walk you through our findings as a commission, and we're going to do this quickly. Again, I remind you that the slides are available so that you can study them at greater length, and we'll get through them so that we have ample opportunity for questions and responses. We discovered as commissioners, how deeply income affects where a family can live, and that in turn affects all the assets that are available to a family. The kinds of things we've been talking about, such as access to healthy food, safe places to play, social networks, stable jobs, and so forth. And this became very foundational to our understanding of what affects health outcomes. In this next chart, you see, we look too at the persistent influences of race and ethnicity, especially among children. Blacks and Hispanics experience the highest rates of poverty, especially among children, and the poverty rates are approximately triple those for whites. More than 1/3 of Black and Hispanic children grow up in poverty. We, as commissioners, were charged with identifying better ways to improve health and challenged by both a floundering economy and shifting demographics. We looked at 20th century strategies and investments and the ways in which those investments, those strategies are really outdated in the 21st century. For example, public education doesn't start in America until children are 5 years old. But research shows that critical pathways are formed long before that. So by the time the child reaches kindergarten, so many of the opportunities of who they might have become have been closed down. So our findings were that to improve health, we must provide opportunities to make healthy decisions, revisit the practice and patterns of investments that we make in various healthcare strategies, work across sectors, and build on the pockets of success that do exist throughout our society. Our recommendations, making investment in America's youngest children a high priority. Fundamentally integrate health into community development and broaden out from treating illness to helping people lead healthy lives. So these three recommendations you'll hear over and over again in various ways as we talk about our recommendations. And this first, a favorite for me as a child advocate, make investing in America's youngest children a high priority. There is probably nothing more urgent. We as a nation often claim a commitment to early childhood, but in fact our funding does not follow that assertion. Despite very clear evidence of the importance of early childhood education, we do not make it a priority. And so we talk about specific recommendations in the area of early childhood education, including strengthening the quality standards for those programs, linking the funding to quality, fund enrollment for all low-income children. You know, the irony is, of course, the children who are most apt to have preschool are the children whose parents can afford to pay for it. And that's in an inverse relationship to the critical need. Help parents provide healthy, nurturing experiences for their children, and to invest in further research and innovation. We're learning so much more about early childhood. The importance of early childhood can hardly be overstated. At-risk children are more likely to arrive at kindergarten a year or more behind their peers and then continue to lose ground from there. What's at risk if we don't invest? Our children's future. The impact of toxic stress on our children. Now, children who live in poverty and in stressed communities have greater evidence of heart disease, stroke, hypertension, diabetes, obesity, smoking, drug use, depression, involvement with juvenile authorities. So it's the lives of children, but it's also the lives of the whole of our society, societal well-being. Our children are our future. $1 spent on early childhood services yields an estimated long-term savings to the society ranging from $1.80 to $17. That's a pretty good investment. I'm not sure about the rest of you, but I certainly don't experience that kind of return on my dollars in this economy. And so doing the right thing for our children is doing the right thing for our society as a whole. We rank 25th of 29 industrialized nations in public investment in early childhood education. And we as a nation invest the bulk of our dollars later in education in grades 6 through 12, and we really need to reverse our strategy here. Our second recommendation related here is to fully integrate health into community development. And that's a notion that may seem strange at first, but one of the things that I'm so pleased to be with you today because you have already recognized the need for stakeholders across disciplines to work together, and that's precisely what this community development emphasis is about. We recommend fully integrating health into the community development to support and speed the integration of finance, health, and community development to revitalize neighborhoods and improve health, to establish incentives and performance measures to spur collaboration, and to copy those things we know work well, replicate the promising integrated models, and invest in innovation. Healthier communities will produce healthier people. Again, I remind you, the zip code may be more determinative than your genetic code in predicting health outcomes. I'm sorry, there we are. At the root, we're trying to attack the corrosive effects of poverty and poor health with community development. Nearly a fifth of all Americans, about 52 million, live in poor neighborhoods that offer few opportunities for healthy living. So if you live in one of those communities, you're incapable of exercising the options that will produce the beneficial health outcome. In this slide, you see, as we try to look at this very tricky issue of community development, one of our commissioners, Shirley Franklin, leads purpose-built communities where the focus is on better lives, not better buildings, Integrative strategies, including cradle to college educational opportunities, mixed income housing, early childhood development programs with affordability strategies, recreational opportunities, produce vibrant communities in the East Lake neighborhood in Atlanta. This is very telling. The purpose-built approach brought in a mix of residents and increased employment rates from 13% to 70%. Our third recommendation is to broaden from treating illness to helping people lead healthy lives. And this is, I think, sort of a common sense instinct. It is easier to keep people healthy than to try to gain ground and recover health once it is lost. So we talked about the importance of the influences in our lives of health. And if you ask most people, you know, how healthy are you, or how do you know how healthy you are? Well, my doctor looks at my pulse and my blood pressure, maybe my blood sugar. Well, those are known as vital signs. But we think that there are some other vital signs. We see them more broadly. Food and housing security, income stability, transportation and child care needs. These might be included in what we call the vital signs. Then, seeking to broaden from treating illness and helping people live these lives, we need to adopt these ideas of vital signs, not to simply try to catch up with disease, but to prevent it in the first place, to create incentives tied to reimbursement for health professionals and healthcare institutions to address non-medical, these environmental factors that we're talking about, and to incorporate non-medical health measures into community health needs assessment. Now, I know in many ways I am bringing coals to Newcastle. Your approach as a national agency is to involve all stakeholders, and in many ways you've pioneered this very approach that we're trying to take. We need a lot of action now. By the very nature of our recommendations, life is a team sport. So we need to disseminate very widely through organizations such as yours and many other sectors of our society our findings, to seek out, cajole, urge, make possible state and local cooperation, find feasible step-by-step strategies for implementing these recommendations, and to evaluate our approaches. It will take all of us working together to make the kinds of changes in our health profile that we need and want as a society. This next slide is a kind of graphic. What would it look like? Well, if you go back to that early chart in your mind that Elaine showed us early in this presentation, of all the factors that contribute to health, a very skinny slice of that pie was the healthcare system, the doctors, the pills, the surgeries, the interventions. And the great bulk of them had to do with other factors. This is a schema that shows what it might look like, all working together to improve health. It's an approach that allows for community development so that people have better opportunities, can make better decisions, and can be encouraged both financially and socially in making those better decisions. We have a stake in each other's work because we have a stake in each other's lives. We, as a health commission, are talking to you today because we profoundly believe that this is not something that can be done only by those who are within what we call the health advocacy community, but that it is a broader coalition that we need to form. And so we're both honored and so grateful for your time and attention today. What makes people happy and what makes them healthy? Good health makes them happy. What happens in their doctor's office is only a very small part of what makes people healthy. All these other factors that we've been talking about contribute so fundamentally to health. All of us have a stake. A healthier, more productive, meaningful life is what's at stake for children, for seniors, for everybody, and for us as a nation. Well, I'm having trouble advancing this last slide.
There you go.
Not on my screen, but I hope that the screen you're looking at says collaboration. We can find others with a similar vision to make our day-to-day work and our achievements more successful. You are among those. You too have a stake. The mental health community has a stake. The financial community has a stake. Life is a team sport. So thank you very much for your kind attention. I'm sorry to move through this at warp speed, but I hope that we now can take questions and responses. Michael, I think I turn back to you now as we approach this discussion.
I think Michael is still on mute.
Okay, well, I'm not sure
Hi,
how we
folks.
proceed. Are you, Elaine?
This is Nakia. I think we're having a little bit of technical difficulty. I'm going to see if I can get Michael back on the line. Hold on for 1 second, guys.
All righty. Elaine, I think since you are live on the mic, are there other concluding comments you would make?
Well, thank you, Eileen. On the screen now is our website, rwjf.org/commission, and you can find both an executive summary and a full report. The full report includes examples of places around the country that are serving as successful models. What we wanted to make sure was that all of these recommendations were achievable, and we know they're achievable because all of these things are happening somewhere in our country. So what we need is the motivation to work to spread those kinds of models and successes. You heard about Purpose Built as one of them, and Health Leads is a group that has changed vital signs in some doctor's office to include some of these social factors. So please do see the full report. As I said, the charts are there also to download and stories about what's happening around the country.
Great, thank you so much. So hi everyone, this is Elizabeth Jennings with National Disability Institute. I just want to take a moment to first say thank you so much to Eileen and Elaine. That was an incredible body of information that I think is meaningful to all of us on the line today. We do have some questions that have come in. The first question is, can you give us some strategies for how we can help our public policy folks make the shift to be more, to put more funding towards early childhood needs?
Eileen, do you want to go first? Or?
Well, let me say that that probably is one of the most difficult questions there is. You know, in some ways it's counterintuitive, especially to a policymaker, when the question is, you know, we have poor health in such and such a district. Shall we give more money to the medical center there, or shall we invest in playgrounds? Well, it's a tough political decision to say playgrounds. But in fact, maybe not playgrounds, but giving attention to community development is important. It's probably more important in the long run, and it really does take a grown-up conversation. And so we really do have to hold out for conversations one of the strategies is always to ask for hearings and to rally, marshal the kind of evidence that's available. And in this regard, Robert Wood Johnson is a great source of resource materials that show the link between better community development and better health care outcomes. Elaine, what would you add to that?
Yes, thank you, Eileen. Yes, we do have on that same website a brand new issue brief on early childhood development, making the case, particularly since we have so much knowledge that has accumulated over the last 10 years showing the importance of that supporting early brain development in those first fragile years. That's the opportunity to grow up to be healthy, and if we miss that, it's not repairable. So it is tough, and you know, babies and children don't vote, which makes it hard. I think there are two things that are happening in this country right now that are positive, and one of them is in sort of a wicked way. It's that middle-class America trying to send their kids to early child care are finding that the cost of early child care can be more than the cost of college. So it's not just a low-income issue, and that means that there is a stronger base of people in this country who are being affected. It's not just people who are really poor. There are many women who are working just to support sending their child into a good early developmental program. That's one thing that I think can give us a broader base of support for this. The second thing is that there are, as I said, the health and medical and scientific evidence is strong and not always well used. The economic impact of this investment that Eileen talked about is strong. James Hickman, who's a Nobel Prize-winning economist at the University of Chicago, and many others have written about the economic cost to this country that we really need to turn around. So we have a strong case. And the other thing that's happening right now is that there's growing support across sectors, leaders in various sectors who are really trying to support this as well. There's a group called Ready Nation that you can Google, and it's a large coalition of business sector CEOs concerned about the economic well-being of our country, and because of that, they are supporting early childhood education. And Eileen, you also have told me about some of the religious organizations in this country who have made early childhood support a priority this year.
Yes. Yeah, and I think civic organizations, religious organizations need to take a lead here in arguing for and providing a platform for multiple stakeholders to participate. Take the example of preschool or early childhood education. Not only do families have a stake in that, not only do healthcare advocates have a stake in that, but the educational community has a stake in that. Employers ought to have a stake in that. And that's the platform, the argument that we need to make so that we alter the way we're thinking. I like to use the example, I think it was in 1904 or so, Upton Sinclair wrote the book The Jungle, just a heart-stopping account of the meatpacking industry in Chicago, in which, you know, poor immigrants, as well as many other foreign objects, were ground up in the meat. It became the first bestseller in American literature. And it resulted in the USDA standards for meat. It took another 7 decades for the occupational safety regulations to be developed. We can't afford another 7 decades. We need to take care of people who are at risk now, and it's going to be interdisciplinary. But let's see if there is another question so we don't just...
Actually, we have several questions that have come in. How can we find the zip code life expectancy for different areas across the country?
Oh, great question. Thank you so much for asking it. So there is something called the County Health Rankings. Again, you can Google that. And it is underwritten by the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. And it looks at every county in America on 60-plus factors that make that county either healthy or unhealthy, and then it ranks the county within their state. And so life expectancy is there, educational attainment, characteristics of communities, income, and it has been a wonderful tool, and I must say it's been the best tool for mayors whose county is, or city is at the very bottom of their state. Again, it's County Health Rankings and Roadmaps.
Great, thank you. The next question that comes in, it asks if has the Commission looked at the connection or impact of child savings accounts and health? And I'm assuming they're referring to the child savings accounts, particularly the program that CFED is looking at, or particularly the program out of San Francisco, the kindergarten to college savings accounts that are showing that when children have savings accounts, that they're more they're more likely to go on to college. And so, did the Commission look at any connections or the impact of these particular accounts?
We haven't looked at the connection between the accounts and health, but Michael, if there's already evidence that families with those accounts find that their kids are more likely to go to college, we know that educational attainment is directly related to health, so that may be the evidence that we need.
Great. The next question that's come in is, can you describe what toxic stress is?
Yes. Thank you so much again for asking. So, boy, this is going to be a really layperson's explanation, so my apologies in advance if there are any scientists on the phone. But basically, when a child is born, just as with other parts of a child's body, the brain is not fully formed, and in the early months and years of life, the pathways of connections between the brain are forming. And children who are exposed to, call it toxic stress, because we all, have stress like when the slides wouldn't advance on this webinar. I'm sure that my blood pressure and Eileen's may have gone up a bit. That's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about are kids living in adversity, either difficult situations at home or food insecurity, unsafe environments. What happens is that when you live in that kind of stressful condition, there are chemicals called cortisols that are expressed in your body in reaction to that kind of stress. And when those chemicals are in a baby or child's brain, some of those connections within the brain don't form. And those are permanent changes in the brain. And so science has seen that children who have those high levels of cortisol, have incomplete connections and pathways in the brain, are much more likely to have chronic disease like diabetes, heart disease that Eileen was mentioning in middle age. So, when we've talked about and seen over the years that low-income people or people living in low-income areas have higher rates of diabetes, higher rates of hypertension, and, we always wondered, well, was it what they were eating? Was it what they were doing? A lot of times it's what happened to them when they were children.
If I just may add to that, just one more, again, another lay view of this. As Elaine has, I think, by the way, Elaine, I'm very impressed with your explanation. This is neurological in origin, that is having to do with the connections neurologically, but the consequences may be in physical health, emotional health, or social well-being. And the notion of the toxic shock means that it is chronic, not episodic. So it's the living in a community where you're not exposed to healthful circumstances day after day. It's not the one-time event, but the chronic nature of it that leads to the toxicity that produces a consequence that is lifelong. Or put another way, an infant or a child receives a life sentence long before they come to the attention of any social agency. So that's the kind of consequence that we're talking about in community development.
Great, thank you. The next question is, did the Commission measure quality of water in those communities with poor health outcomes?
No. The Commission actually looked at a range of assets in communities, and I'm not sure whether water quality is in the community health rankings and roadmaps. It's one of the 60-plus factors. So I would have to send you there to see if that's in those health factor ratings.
Okay, great, thank you. The next question is, did the Commission look at family members with disabilities and the impact of the additional costs that disability presents?
You know, I love all of these questions because what we're seeing here, and Eileen, I'll turn it over to you too, is that you're identifying all these factors that really reinforce what we've been saying, the need to collaborate across interests and across strengths, particularly at the community level, but clearly at the state and national level as well, as we're looking at policy changes and where we invest. So that we did not look specifically at disabilities. We did look at some racial and income differences. We were taking we were providing the commissioners with sort of national level data, totally understanding that all of the kinds of things we're talking about here and access to clean water, all of these things are really important. They all fall into the huge bucket of social factors that influence health. Eileen, did you want to add to that?
Well, I would just say this. I think there are some statements behind these questions, like you should pay attention to water, and you should pay attention to the cost of disabilities. And you're exactly right. That's one of the reasons I was thrilled when Elaine invited me to participate today. We need to explore not just the areas that we looked at, and we looked at these aggregated data, but now to explore each of these. What about the consequence of water? We need more attention to that. We need to take a look at the costs and the stress related to disabilities. And so I'm so very grateful to have that question and to urge the National Disability Institute and all the participating institutions to continue to explore this wherever they are and in their networks, so that we can come to add that into the factors we're considering as we look at better health outcomes.
Great, thank you. So we're going to take two more questions. So the next question is do you have insight or suggestions on how we build the bridge between the health community and the asset building communities?
So, that bridge has to be built from both sides. and it's not easy because we all have more than full-time jobs, more issues that we can deal with. I was mentioning earlier that a lot of this happens at the community level. We are at a place in our country with a lot of national and state problems, including economic and others, lack of civility across sectors. And what we've found is that there are, even though things seem to be slow or sluggish to change nationally, communities are working on their own to make these changes. There are cities and counties in this country, for example, that now provide free early child care development programs to all of their citizens. So the place to begin, if you're working at a community level, is at that community level. And I'm so happy to have web access now. It makes it so much easier to find places that have, for starters, in their mission statements, in the reports that they are producing, in the conferences that they're holding. It's just like Michael and I met in North Carolina at a conference. This is how these connections happen.
Michael, I would approach that one other way. I want to make a kind of a strategic suggestion about how to approach that. I think in any community, it's important to find an agency. It might be a hospital that is willing to foster and sponsor a multidisciplinary discussion, or it might be some other kind of an agency, a civic agency. It might be a banking institution. Find an agency. A second strategy is find a common problem. We all know that there are too high a level of child obesity in our community, or too high a level of hypertension or diabetes. Or find a problem that several agencies hold in common, or find an answer that the community holds in common. Look what happened when the new housing opened in our community and drug arrests dropped, or crime levels fell, or school attendance or employment rose. Find an agency, find a problem, or find an answer in common. I think, to use the bridge building metaphor, you've got to have some kind of strut across the abyss that you can build a bridge on, and those are three of them that I would point to.
Great. The next question is, can you give an example of what you meant by new vital signs? I think that was from recommendation number 3.
Sure, yes. So there is a program, and it's called Health Leads, L-E-A-D-S. And it's a good example of this. It started in Massachusetts, but it's spread into places all across the country. It's not the only one. There are several. But Health Leads puts volunteers into health clinics in low-income neighborhoods. And in those health clinics, when a healthcare provider sees a patient, as Eileen says, they look at vital signs, blood pressure, temperature, those sorts of things. But there's also a checklist in that same vital signs list to say, are you taking your medication? If you're not taking your medication, then ask, why is that? Why aren't you taking it? And to probe, can you get to the drugstore? Can you pay for the drugs? Do you have enough food for your children? Are they eating fruits and vegetables? Do you have transportation to get to a job? Are your kids in school? So physicians have said to us, I get so frustrated when I am seeing someone with a chronic disease and I prescribe for them, as Eileen said, pills that can really help them, and time after time I find that they're just not taking them, and then I find out it's because they can't get to the drugstore and they can't pay for the pills, or they can only pay for half of them and they're cutting them in half. So that's the sort of checklist. The American Academy of Pediatrics has a special emphasis this year on children and poverty, and they've provided some of those sorts of checklists to pediatricians who are really in the forefront in this. So, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Another very, very important vital sign is what's your access to fresh fruit and vegetables? You can ask, the doctor asks, are you taking your medications? Well, let's say we're talking about diabetes. Where do you buy your groceries? Well, I don't have a car. I can't walk very far, so I buy most of my groceries most of the food I eat at the convenience store at the corner. Do they have fresh fruits and vegetables? No. I'm not able to get those very often. Well, that's a vital sign. If you live in a food desert, that's at least as important as your blood sugar.
Great. All right, so one last question, because it's come in a couple of times, but and it's talking about looking at some of the programs within local communities, and I guess we can look at the early childhood programs. And one of the roadblocks we're seeing is that the programs look at the gross income, not the net. So do you see any changes on the horizon where that might be changing so that people can access some of the various programs?
Well, that's why we were talking about the confluence right now of business, education, parents saying early childhood development programs are just too expensive, I think that's a roadblock looking at gross income, not net. It's just also a roadblock for people who can't access a quality program at all. There are a number of models around the country, and a number of them are in the Commission report that I'm looking at. We looked at the importance of telling stories in each of these areas, and I would refer you to some of those examples. The advocacy is for making early child developmental programs available universally. As Eileen says, we invest heavily in grades 6 through 12, and we're really missing the boat here with younger children. So, we're not trying to decrease the financial roadblock. We're trying to bomb it out of the space, get rid of it entirely.
To put it very boldly, Michael, as long as we see early childhood education as a profit center, we're going to reap the consequences of children who arrive at the doorstep of kindergarten with deficits we can't solve. And so as a society, we're going to have to put more money into early childhood education and see it as a good investment. I mean, remember, the return is huge. For every dollar we spend, we're going to get back at least 2 and maybe as much as 18 as a society. Now, it takes a long time for a society to come to recognize its best interest in this way, but that's really what's at stake here.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Lender, and thank you also, Elaine, for sharing information with us today. Elaine, I'm so thankful that I attended your keynote address there at that conference because the information that you both have shared really sets the stage, I think, for the work that we're all doing personally as well as professionally to really build a better economic future. So we're very grateful for you all spending some time with us and sharing your insight as well as recommendations from the report. Before we end our call, I would like to remind everyone that we are doing the My American Dream video contest still. We have extended the submission deadlines by 2 weeks, and so the new deadline is September 23rd. This year of 2014. So if you're working with individuals who want to share what their American dream is, please encourage them to create a 3-minute video with their iPhone or any type of phone they have, or their computer, iPad. These are amateur videos, 3 minutes long, to share with America what their American dream is. And then they have a chance of winning a $1,000 cash prize, a digital tablet of their choice, and a mentor to help guide them in achieving their American dream. So you can check out more information on that at our website at www.realeconomicimpact.org. Please join us on October 8th for our webinar on enhancing employment outcomes with financial stability programs. And we will be talking about the linkages of how we see better employment outcomes when we incorporate financial education, free tax preparation services, individual development accounts within our workforce development programs. So please join us for that webinar on October 8th. Reminder, please join our network and be a part of the conversation, as we will be continuing this conversation based on the recommendations that the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation's Commission has shared with us today. Thanks again to our sponsors, Walmart, Bank of America, Accorda, Burton Blatt Institute, and the Internal Revenue Service for supporting the work of the National Disability Institute. Here's where you can find additional information on our organization. And again, I'd like to thank Elaine Arkin as well as Dr. Eileen Lendner for being with us today and for sharing this information. So with that, we will close out the webinar, and I hope everybody has a great day. Thank you.
Thank you.